Oh, it's time for the midweek edition of Legal AF. The trial of Donald Trump might be dark, but we're not. Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, Michael Popok, going to break it all down at the intersection of law and politics. These are the things you got to know at midweek. We're going to do the Trump trial two ways, regular and extra crispy. We're going to talk about Stormy and her testimony, the mistrial motion and why it was rejected. We'll give our commentary about how the Stormy testimony went for either side. Talk about the gag order and the mayor of New York and commissioners at Rikers Island gearing up for the possible jailing of Donald Trump. How likely is that? And Karen and I will talk about the upcoming witnesses, who we think they could be. And we'll have a little debate about ones that maybe I think should go on and Karen doesn't, or vice versa. This is about, as I've said before, now infamously, it's about checks, not sex. Stormy Daniels, fascinating to listen to. But that is not what I believe, and I want to hear from Karen, is going to turn the tide of this case. It's going to be people you never heard about before and you'll never hear about again. The accounts payable supervisor for Trump, the controller for Trump, and then eventually Michael Cohen. Again, rolled up magazines and being paddled on the back was interesting, and the jury tittered about it. But is that going to convict Donald Trump? Or are the checks, the business ledgers, his signature, and the testimony of those lower level people in his organization that'll win the day? We'll talk about that. Then we'll leave all things Trump trial and we'll go and talk about dark days. Judge Aileen Cannon presiding over Mar-a-Lago, as we expected. That case is not happening before the November election. And now, especially given that the judge has allowed all the deadlines to slip in the Classified Information Procedures Act espionage case, and then pointed to the slippage of those deadlines for the reason she can't try the case before November. It's almost like she's saying, what idiot presiding over this case allowed these deadlines to slip without being met? Well, I can give you an idea when Karen and I talk about it. And if we have time, we'll talk about some other developments and some of the other cases involving Donald Trump at that same intersection of law and politics. But big news, I should have led off with this. Let's bring Karen on. Karen and I ran into each other at a law firm where we were working on separate cases. And I can't tell you, it was the highlight of my day to randomly bump into my podcast partner and friend in the hallway of this law firm.
It was fun. It was definitely fun. Love seeing you in person.
Absolutely. You too. You had a snazzy jacket that I think you wear sometimes when you do some other work, and I liked it a lot, but it's always fun. And all kidding aside, Karen and I work in New York. We have some overlapping cases, and full disclosure, I've used her firm for some cases and vice areas of expertise that I don't have, and vice versa. And so, it's we're practicing lawyers, and we're real friends outside of here. And I wanted to kind of bring that up. Let's turn to the thing that you've been focused a lot on since the beginning, kind of being the leader here on Legal AF with Ben, but really you, in covering the Trump trial. And Wednesdays is a perfect day for us to pick up with it because it's the midweek and there's no trial that day. And so we can kind of catch our breath and take the plane up 5,000 feet, look back down, and see what's happened now that it's landed with a thump on the table, how we think it's impacting the jury, what's happening with the lawyers, and we can do some comments and criticism on both sides about that, and then where it goes from here. And that's why we're going to do Trump trial two ways. Let's start with what you observed, Karen, as a prosecutor in this courtroom, this judge, some of these very same people when you were in the Manhattan DA's office about let's do Stormy. Been waiting for Stormy Daniels to testify. People call Stormy Daniels. I love only in New York did they use her stage name and not her legal name. And everybody turned, and believe me, the jury was interested. But Stormy was an interesting cat up there. She's an interesting witness. And I've had witnesses like this who can't answer a question and then have been waiting 10 years to give their story. What did you observe about how Susan Hoffinger handled Stormy's credibility in terms of her testimony. Why did the prosecutors get so into the weeds, inadvertently or otherwise, into the sex details about rolled up magazines and spanking and all of that in this case? And were they flirting with possible mistrial and reversible error? And then we'll talk about Mershon blaming the defense for letting the trial get into the weeds of Donald Trump's sex life. What did you make of all that?
So this week, the trial focused on the kind of falsification of business records portion of the case, where they called Jeff McConney and Rona Graff. And they were really started to talk about really what the meat of the case is. And then they called Stormy Daniels after they called this book publisher, which I thought was genius, by the way, that these books that Donald Trump has written, they're using his own words essentially against him about how to be a billionaire and micromanage everything and send checks back that are too much or that you don't agree with, and look at every dime. I mean, all that kind of stuff that they're going to just use against him, his own words. They tried to say, oh, a ghostwriter was part of this too. But I thought that was extremely effective. So if he doesn't take the stand, you do have his own words on how he conducts his very small family-run business. And then came the blockbuster witness, obviously Stormy Daniels, who testified on direct for the better part of almost I think it was the whole morning. And then they got to cross-examination. And I think they got into about an hour and change worth of cross-examination of her. And they're going to finish that on Thursday. And it's going to go quite long. I've heard from people that they initially thought they were going to be short and just brief. And I think now they're going to go quite long. And I think the reason is as follows. The defense, so let's just take, let's take a step back. So Donald Trump is charged with falsification of business records, right? What makes it a felony is that they were committing another crime or concealing another crime, right? This election crime. So what does Stormy Daniels, what is her role in proving either of those things? And her role in proving those things is she is the hush money that was paid that is at issue with all the checks that were done here, right? And so it's not Karen McDougal, who he had an affair with, who he also paid off, or the doorman, who he also paid off. He actually, she is the subject of the 34 counts here, right? It was all to pay Michael Cohen back for her, which is why we've heard from her and why she testified and why she's relevant. Now, interestingly, though, she didn't say anything about knowing anything about the falsification of the business records per se, but she was extremely, I think, important because she did testify that she tried to sell her story to Donald Trump years prior, because this affair happened in 2006, or this relationship, or whatever you want to call it. They had sex once, but they met multiple times. And she described all of these meetings in detail. One of them had a professional football player at the table, along with Karen McDougal, the Super Bowl ring of the professional football player. Or another time, she just gave a lot of details about all these meetings. And so it seems like this is a friendship that lasted for quite some time, although they only had sex once. And Donald Trump's his lawyers opened the fact that this never happened, that she is a liar. And by doing that, by calling her credibility into question, then the prosecution has to really prove that what she's saying is true. Because if she's lying, right, then they will discredit everything that she says. There's an actual charge that you can ask the judge to give the jury. It's called the falsus in uno charge, which basically means If you lie about one thing, you can find that they're lying about everything. And that would be problematic, because I think she's important to to corroborate the part of this charge that makes it, that shows that this was really influenced by the election, because that's what bumps this up to a felony. And so the reason is because this relationship happened a while back. And she tried to sell this story at one point. She tried to tell her story, and there was no market for it. Nobody wanted it. And it wasn't until the Access Hollywood tape came out and the election that this actually had some monetary value. And so if he was really concerned about Melania and it wasn't about the election, he would have bought it and made her sign an NDA way before that. But she testified that he didn't seem at all concerned. He never asked her to sign an NDA. He never denied it. And he didn't want to sell this. He didn't want to buy the story prior to that. And so clearly he wasn't that worried about his wife or his reputation or his kids. If anything, he would meet her in public with other people, with his mistress that he was having an affair with, Karen McDougal, all the while cheating on his wife with both of them. So he didn't seem to care when it came to his wife. He only cared because of the election, according to Stormy Daniels. And that's why she was able to monetize it and make the money that she made. Now, Donald Trump said that the fact is it doesn't matter if they had an affair or not. It's a matter. The point is, it matters that he paid her. And so Dino Sajudin, that was debunked, right? That didn't happen, but he paid him because he didn't want that story to come out. And so the reason all these details are coming out is because her credibility is in question, and it's her story. It's not to be salacious or dirty him up. You know, for example, she didn't describe what she has described in her documentary or the 60 Minutes interview or pardon?
I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Well, it's true though. She didn't describe.
Talk about his genitalia.
That she said his penis is unusually small with a mushroom head. Now, if I were the prosecutor, I was a prosecutor for a long time. I did sex crimes and child abuse cases. And in cases like child abuse cases, or in cases that in adult cases where there was a complete denial about whether the sex happened, one of the things I would do is I would ask for details of things that only someone who has had access to that area has seen. And I would do search warrants to make the person drop their drawers, and I would take a picture. I've actually exonerated people because somebody said, oh, he's got a birthmark somewhere and it looks like such and such, and it was a child abuse case and there was no such birthmark. And so, you know what? Guess what? I cannot prove that case any longer. There was another child abuse case in particular I'm thinking of that there was this description of these marks all over somebody's penis, and it was very detailed description, and the search warrant revealed he had these marks. And this was not someone who was like a family member who you might see changing in the background. This was like a coach or I can't remember if it was like a tutor or a coach or something. There's no reason this child should know that information. And that was the key to proving the case that the sex happened. So the fact of the matter is the prosecution didn't do that here. And so I don't think it was, and I think they could have, if they wanted to, they could have actually said, you know what, they're denying this. They're calling her credibility into question, and her credibility is important. And so I was struck by her testimony when she said things like, I took a special elevator up to the penthouse floor and his bodyguard was standing outside and left me in. And I walk in and it was a suite that was bigger than my last 2 or 3 apartments. And there were several rooms, and he was wearing a satin pajamas, and the furniture was like expensive, heavy furniture. I mean, you got a real texture for where she was and what she was doing. And when you can provide those types of details, it has the ring of truth. So I think they opened the door to being able to prove her credibility, because her credibility is important here, because it really, they called her a liar about her getting threats, right? She talked about being threatened by somebody. They were cross-examining her about that. I mean, they essentially are calling her a liar about all of this. And so she's allowed to prove the facts of the case. So I don't think, not only do I not think it's mistrialable, I think it was utterly appropriate. And of course, you know, the judge was like, well, you didn't object, you know, when they freaked out over lunch and asked for a mistrial. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that's a good place for me to do it with you on the.
So when they brought the mistrial motion, and we reasonable minds can differ about whether Susan Hoffinger for the prosecutor's office kind of let the witness get a little bit away from her on some of the issues. I agree with you in principle about almost everything you just said about the need to put on more than I had a story to tell about Donald Trump and I got paid not to tell it. I get that that's not going to be enough for the jury, even though it almost could be a stipulated fact that there was a non-disclosure agreement, there was a payment that was made, and in return, she didn't do certain things. But I agree with you. But when you have a little bit of a runaway witness, what I mean by that is, I'm not sure, and I'm speaking from a practitioner here, I'm not sure Susan knew where Stormy Daniels was going at certain points in that testimony. When you have a witness who is giving narrative and paragraphs are tumbling out of their mouth, even if you've prepared them, which we know that she was, I assume that she was prepared by the prosecutor's office, there were moments that were a little bit of a white knuckle moment because she's not really answering my question and she's getting into some areas. And there are some limits around, as you know well, about what you can bring in that won't be prejudicial, but is necessary to prove your case. The way that I would have handled that when it got, if the other side had held up their end of the bargain and hadn't fallen asleep at the switch, which is where you were starting to go, because this is an adversarial process, which means that while the judge presides and of course can't let clear error happen in his courtroom or violations of his orders or prior rulings, short of that, he's a referee in a prize fight. And as long as they stay inside the ring and don't hit below the belt and follow the rules, they're going to let this case he's going to let this case get tried the way the parties think it should be tried, subject to New York law. They never objected on the defense side enough, or really at all, about all of this salacious, I'll call it salacious information coming out about through Stormy, when they could have. In fact, he said later on in the mistrial motion, when the jury was excused, yeah, I was surprised that you defense allowed as much of that testimony to come in. In other words, I would have sustained your objection had you made it, but you didn't make it. And I jumped in a couple of times as the judge and cut off the testimony of this witness. And I know it was embarrassing and all that, but that's the way it is. It's really on you. And if you think the bell's been rung, which is what Todd Blanche likes to say, oh, the bell's been rung, the horse is out of the barn, and all these other mixed metaphors. That's on you. That's on you. And then the other thing
what bell? That there was a missionary. It sounded like the most boring sex I've ever heard. Missionary style.
Well, let me sort of, except she verged on accusing him of a sex crime, which, by the way, probably happened. I'm not saying, but when she said. Well, let me just, before we debate it, let me make sure the audience understands it. So she said, it's all right. You and I are in shorthand mode because of our relationship and what we know. Like, blah, 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 like, but all right. So so from her perspective, she said, there was a bodyguard who was out in front of the door, which sounds like she wasn't free to leave. That even Trump blocked the door. Also sounds like not free to leave. That I don't remember how I got into the bed, nor how the sex happened, which sounds like against my will. So listen, we're verging into sex crime there, Miss Sex Crime Prosecutor. This isn't a sex crime case.
True, but she said over and over and over again, I didn't say no.
Yeah,
I didn't want to do it, but it was consensual. Like, she's very much,
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But that's their argument, right? Like, oh, now the thing I also fault the defense for is that there is a proper procedure to handle this pre-trial. It's called motion in limine. They made a motion in limine there was a motion in limine to preclude evidence and to strike Stormy as a witness. And the judge said, no, I understand the necessity of this witness on these issues. They didn't then say, well, judge, look, we need to be able to cabin her testimony and keep her on the straight and narrow. Otherwise, we're going to get into things that you can explain to the audience, Karen, like no other person, about Molyneux and different things you're not allowed to get into in front of this jury, especially in the shadow of the Harvey Weinstein reversal of his conviction. And so this is what we think that this is the script we think she should have to follow, and not deviate. They never did that. They never did that. They just went for the home run, grand slam, get rid of her as a witness. No, we can't get that. Okay, fine. Then we're off and running then with what happened. And then it was, if you're going to do that, if you're not going to make the judge make the hard decisions early on about the path that the witness has to stay on, then you got to stay awake and hit the buzzer. It's like a game show, and buzz in when you see something that goes wrong or you want to make that argument. And if the shoe was on the other foot, prosecutors are really good. You know them. You work with them. They'd be up and, like they were in the opening statements, they'd be up and down constantly with objections if they thought it was inappropriate. They know how to do that. So the lawyer team today of the incredible shrinking Todd Blanche, who seems to have very limited role now in this case, other than taking the judge's abuse and Donald Trump's abuse, it's really become the Emile Beauvais and Susan Neckles show for key witnesses, including, I assume, Michael Cohen next week. I don't think Todd Blanche is going to make that appearance for that.
No, he is. That's apparently that's what they're putting out through sources. They're putting it out that the reason he can't possibly be doing any of these other witnesses is because he's singularly focused on Michael Cohen. Let's see if that turns out to be the case. But that's what people are saying.
That's very interesting. Well, I guess that would make sense, because what else is he doing there? But let's talk about mistrial. So the mistrial motion was, too much stuff, all this sex stuff, blowing the minds of the jury, prejudice, and all the other doctrines. And so two questions for you. Do you think the judge was right to put the blame on them in this process? And two, do you think we now have, I know they'll take the appeal, but do you think we have, based on the Weinstein decision and all of that, a reversible error problem here with the judge allowing all of that information from Stormy to come in?
Of all the things that have come in, the fact that they had missionary style sex and there was a power imbalance because he was the same age as her father, and P.S. had said, "You remind me of my daughter." Creepy, weird.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah.
Right.
So weird.
That's always great. Right before he had sex with her, it says, "It reminds me of." All right, I'm going to leave that alone. Bye.
Yeah, no, it's just so weird. But don't forget what's also come out in this trial is the Access Hollywood tape, right? Where Donald Trump is admitting to sexual assault, right? So if anything, that's the more salacious thing that's come out at this trial. But that's what this trial is about. Right or wrong, good or bad. I mean, look, all facts that tend to prove someone's guilt are prejudicial. So I just don't think this was unnecessarily prejudicial. This is part of the narrative. This is exactly what their relationship was. And there was no way they wouldn't open the door to this information, because they're not going to, Donald Trump doesn't want to admit to having sex. If he had admitted to having sex and said yes, then I could see, okay, going into graphic detail might be, for some reason, they don't want to go into it. The minute he calls her a liar and says she's lying about all of this, I think at that point she can talk about it. So I don't think we're even close to the line of mistrial. But as you pointed out, there's a brand new decision that has come down by the New York's highest court during this trial on reversing Harvey Weinstein on the grounds that the judge in that case impermissibly allowed too much Molyneux evidence. This is not Molyneux, by the way. This is direct
what is
evidence.
Explain to our audience Molyneux.
So Molyneux is the ability to the feds call it 404B evidence. In New York, it's called Molyneux. It's the French spelling, Molineux. It's based on a case. And it basically means you're allowed to, normally when you're trying a case, you're only allowed to prove what happened in that case, the facts surrounding the crime. But sometimes you want to be able to bring in prior bad acts of the defendant to help prove your crime. Now, there's a concept in the law that's in every courthouse, in every criminal courthouse in this country, that you're not allowed to prove prior bad acts, meaning other crimes or other bad things that a defendant has done, in order to show propensity to commit a crime. So if you're a burglar, you can't put in other burglaries just to prove he's a burglar. So therefore, it makes sense that he would do this. Propensity evidence is not allowed, but there are exceptions to when you can bring in prior bad acts in your direct case, meaning as part of your evidence, as part of your proof. And the exceptions are if it goes to prove a defendant's motive or their intent or some kind of element of one of the crimes or absence of mistake, things like that. So, so here, the Molyneux evidence that was allowed in had to do with the payoffs of the doorman and of Karen McDougal. Those are prior bad acts, right? Essentially, even though it's not illegal, they could be prejudicial. And those were allowed in as part of their direct case because it goes to show the defendant's intent to try and suppress these things around the election. It tends to go towards the part of this that this was all around the time of the election. This was this catch and kill scheme. So that's why that was allowed in. But you got to be careful because if you allow too much in, which is what they said in the Harvey Weinstein case was of course Molyneux can be allowed in, but they allowed too much. And they allowed so much in that there was also a ruling involving what the defendant, if he were to take the stand in Harvey, what they could cross-examine him on. And they said that went too far too. And essentially all of those bad acts took away his right to testify because there's no way he could testify. And so if I were the prosecutor prosecuting this case, I'd want to strike that balance and not put in too much evidence, but put in just enough. And so the fact of the matter is that because Karen McDougal and the doorman are part of the narrative, I think it was appropriate that they talk about it, but I wouldn't call them as witnesses because they're not the people involved in the 34 counts that are charged. But the way Stormy is, because those were reimbursements for the Stormy Daniels $130,000 payment. I, as a prosecutor, would say a conviction's great, but you don't want a conviction that's reversed. So I would not bring that in. I would not bring Karen McDougal in as a witness or the doorman because I don't need them. That would go a bridge too far and could potentially taint the jury or taint the verdict if they get a verdict given the Molyneux decision.
So since we anticipated a potential debate, let me be devil's advocate about Karen McDougal. So on Karen McDougal, they've heard from Pecker. I love this case. They've heard from Pecker's testimony about the Trump Tower conspiracy, that there were 3 targets of the catch and kill program. The doorman with the story about the out-of-wedlock child that Donald Trump allegedly had with somebody that they paid $30,000 for. The Karen McDougal $150,000 that was paid by David Pecker, and the Stormy $130,000 payment that was paid not by David Pecker because David Pecker got, no pun intended, stiffed by Donald Trump. He didn't get paid. He didn't get repaid, and so it fell on the slender shoulders of Michael Cohen to make the payment instead. So Pecker told that story, most of which clears the hearsay hurdles, for various exceptions to that. So I agree with you so far. I'm not needing Karen McDougal. Karen McDougal would only testify that she had sex with Donald Trump too. It was denied. Pecker signed the deal with her. She got paid by Pecker. She was a fitness article writer for National Enquirer, because when I think fitness magazines, I think National Enquirer. And then Pecker's already said the reason he didn't do the next one, which was Stormy, is because he didn't get repaid by Donald on the first one, which was Karen McDougal. So far, I completely agree with you. I don't think she adds anything, and do you have that potentiality for it being that 404 bad, prejudicial evidence kind of stuff, although I would love to see her on the stand. So I think I'm coming around as I'm making this comment to your position. I thought earlier, I was like, no, I want Karen McDougal, but I do want Karen McDougal to go take the stand because I want to further embarrass Donald Trump, but that's the very reason you don't want to put him on during a criminal trial. This was a civil trial. I would be selling tickets and popcorn for that. So in the next segment, having talked about the mistrial, I want to pick up with the gag order, the violations of the gag order, Donald Trump acting out in court in contumacious or contemptuous conduct that the judge already called out, jail as a real possibility, future witnesses, including the penultimate witness, whenever that's going to be, of Michael Cohen, and what's been done as preparatory work, as spade work leading into Michael Cohen masterfully by the prosecution. We're going to do all of that, but first, a word from our sponsors. What if you could support small family farmers and reduce your environmental imprint, all while enjoying the highest quality meat on earth? When you join the Monk movement, you can. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and sustainable wild-caught salmon straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did. And as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should, because the family farm does it better, and the Moink difference is a difference you can taste. Unlike the supermarket, Moink gives you total control over the quality and source of your food. You choose the meat delivered in every box, like ribeyes, to chicken breasts, to pork chops, to salmon fillets, and much more. Plus, you can cancel anytime. Moink is helping save rural America. I love it, and you will too. Join the Moink movement today. Shark Tank host Kevin O'Leary called Moink's bacon the best bacon he's ever tasted. And Ring Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff, he jumped at the chance to invest in Moink. Plus, they guarantee you'll say, oink, oink. I'm just so happy I got moinked. I know I do, and you will too. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/legalaf right now, and listeners of this show get free bacon for a year. That's 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/legalaf. That's moinkbox.com/legalaf.
Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S. with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S.? They have everything you could possibly want: fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. Find the perfect fit for your climate and your space. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. I love Fast Growing Trees. I've actually been a customer of theirs for many years, even way before they were a sponsor of Legal AF, although I'm thrilled that they are a sponsor. And I'm growing a Meyer lemon tree in my apartment. How fun is that? So they have great customer service. It's incredible. And I save money because I don't have to use a landscaper. So you don't need to have a yard or a lot of space. You can grow things in your home like I'm doing, or outside in your yard. Find out what's good for your particular area, your region. And they have houseplants. They have everything. And their experts will help curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and your needs. You don't have to drive around to nurseries and big gardening centers. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped to your door in 1 to 2 days. Whether you're looking to add privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection, with growing and care advice available 24/7. Talk to a plant expert about your soil type, your landscape design, how to take care of your plants, everything else you need. No green thumb required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using code LEGALAF at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com. Using the code LEGALAF at checkout, that's fastgrowingtrees.com, and use Legal AF at checkout. This offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply.
And we're back. I got the terms and conditions. The terms and conditions of the gag order on Donald Trump and how he continues to violate it. We got Judge Merchan, who said during a hearing, I don't know what to do with, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know what to do with you. $1,000 a fine for violations. You got 10 of them. Don't seem to matter to you. That's all I can do under the judiciary law. I've got to seriously consider incarceration and jail time. And Donald Trump goes out and does his thing in front of those bicycle racks where he does imaginary press conferences. I don't think there's anybody really over there. It's just him and a very awkwardly looking Todd Blanche standing next to him. And then goes into court and during Stormy Daniels' testimony starts acting out, only reinforcing, as far as I'm concerned, her credibility and her veracity and her authenticity about the story she's telling. When she tells this very hyper detailed, this very prolix story about a rolled up magazine and Donald Trump's backside, you hear him say out loud, "Bullshit!" So loud that the judge up at the bench heard it. That's to stop the case, call Todd Blanche on the carpet and go, "What are we doing?" Now he's acting out in front of witnesses, which are both intimidating the witnesses potentially and the jurors in full view of the jurors. He used the C word. That's contempt. It's contemptuous. I say contumacious, but the judge is old school. He said contemptuous, which means I'm running out of options here with the fines. The fines aren't working. He just does that Donald Trump sees that as a toll on the road, just a cost of doing business. Talk to me from a prosecutor standpoint, from your standpoint, judgment standpoint, about whether the judge on the next violation, whenever it happens, and it will happen, is going to put Donald Trump in jail. And we've got, of course, our Mayor Adams, former law enforcement, who's already said when he was hit with the question during his media event, he said, "Oh, well, we're ready for anything at Rikers Island. I'm sure the people at Rikers Island, he actually said in the same breath, we handled Harvey Weinstein. We can handle Donald Trump." And we know the Secret Service, because we reported on it a couple of weeks ago, is in talks just in case Donald Trump steps over the line intentionally or otherwise and gets jailed. What do you think? What do you think? Talk about.
No, I was just saying the one thing I'm not worried about is New York City's ability to handle Donald Trump. I mean, the fact that we're having a criminal trial in 100 Center Street, which is the criminal court building that I spent my entire career in, and there hasn't been a problem. They are going to trial, not an issue. This is, he's had several trials in federal court, Eugene Carroll, the state court, Judge Engoron. New York City can handle anything, and the corrections can handle it, the police can handle it. So I'm not worried about that. What do I think the judge is going to do if he does it again? And the answer is it depends. If Donald Trump does something really egregious, says something that could put the jurors at risk, if he mentions the jury at all, I think then he does put him in. But he has options. He could put him in behind the courtroom. There's a jail cell behind every courtroom in that building. There's this whole internal infrastructure of that whole building that prisoners get brought in through a sally port, and then they go into the innards of the building, and there's this whole Department of Corrections controlled inner workings of the entire building, where there's special elevators and special hallways and jail cells that are behind every single courtroom, because they regularly in that courtroom produce people from jail or prison who have to come to court. And so then they don't come in the back door of the court or the front door of the courtroom. They come in the back door, right? There's a door by where the judge sits. So there's jail cells back there. They're holding cells. They're not meant for overnight stays. So I can imagine a scenario where the judge would put him in for the day, or put him in for an hour, or put him in over lunch. It doesn't have to be overnight. It doesn't have to be whatever. Another option is he could sentence him to jail after he puts it over for sentencing for after the verdict. That's another option. I mean, if I'm the judge, what I'm worried about is causing a mistrial, right? And you don't want to be the cause of a mistrial, or you want to get to a verdict, whatever it is. And so I'd be concerned, for example, that the jury, who isn't supposed to read, and they get charged this, they get told this every single day: don't read anything about this case, don't discuss anything about this case, don't watch TV about this case. I mean, it's kind of hard because it's everywhere, right? It's reported on constantly, like almost like no other case. So if I'm the judge, I'd be thinking, if I put Donald Trump in jail, that's going to be all over the news. There'll be news alerts, right, on people's phones, and the jury's going to see that. And I wouldn't want to prejudice the jury by something I did. So I would do this as a last resort. I might put him on house arrest. It's another option, or or take away his social media privileges, or some, there's different things he can do. Would he put him in for the duration of the trial? I doubt it. Donald Trump has been somewhat reined it in. And I say somewhat, but one of the problems I have with the judge's order is the judge, for the last 4 requests for contempt, he did not find him in contempt with 3 of the 4 postings. He's kind of left open this gray area. Well, if you're going to respond to Michael Cohen, something he says, I will call that political speech, or if that kind of thing. So I don't love that, because it kind of sends the message that he can do these things when it comes to certain people. So depending on what he does, I'm not sure he would put him in. But with the jury, we've talked about this before. That's the third rail for the judge. He has to protect this jury. He has to get a verdict.
Yeah, agreed. And it looks like it's going to be coming up relatively soon. Let's talk just a little bit more about some future witnesses. I'll give you my view on the lead up to Michael Cohen, because we're getting into the Cohen range here. There's a reason, from my perspective as a trial lawyer, Michael Cohen's going towards the end of the trial. It's because the prosecution only benefits from telling the story their way, and also bolstering in advance the credibility of Michael Cohen by having more people not named Michael Cohen say the same thing as Michael Cohen. It corroborates those data points, and it insulates Michael from the eventual motion that, Karen, you mentioned earlier related to another witness about, well, he's a liar about one thing, he's a liar about everything. They're going to make that motion against Michael. They tried it already. And in the New York Attorney General case where Michael testified, in fact, Judge Engoron made a point in his order of saying, I am going to credit, and I'm not going to apply that rule. I know that rule. I'm not going to apply it to Michael Cohen. I don't feel that I feel he was telling the truth about these particular issues. And so he didn't use that. But you're right, they're going to look for that kind of charge to the jury, as if you're right, and you probably are, that Todd Blanche's big coming out party is going to be taken on. You better do a great job, by the way, for Donald Trump, because he's putting a lot of his eggs in that basket. But all the things that we've seen leading up to this, there's 3 people in the conspiracy in Trump Tower. 2 of them are going to testify. David Pecker already testified, witness number 1. Jury has already heard all of that. Jury has seen the checks with Michael Cohen's name on it. They've even heard secretly recorded audio of Michael Cohen already before he even gets there. They've already anticipated and done preemptive strikes against the arguments that Michael Cohen, because of his past, because of his criminal issues and his convictions and things that he did or said, is going to come in. They're weighted down by so much baggage that the jury will find him to be not credible. So what we've been watching, parallel to the prosecution and the case against Donald Trump, is the case for Michael Cohen, because they have to use him. Not only do they promise it in the opening, they need him, not on everything. This is like a hymnal. You sing from different pages of the hymnal. They need him to sort of tie the thing together at the end. But because of his past, they want others to go before Michael. Now we're sort of, it's sort of like softening up the jury. It's like I like using boxing metaphors. It's like they're working the body with the jury to soften them up for when Michael Cohen finally comes on. And Michael Cohen's going to come on. It's not going to be this week, probably sometime next week as they wrap. And there'll be some other witnesses that we can sort of anticipate. They've done a good job from the prosecution of doing what I call inside out. Inside witnesses, most of them who don't want to be there but have to tell the truth and have told the truth. That's like Rana Graf, the executive assistant, longtime right-hand person, and the woman who's the head of accounts payable. nobody's ever heard of and never hear of again, and then Jeff McConney is sort of standing in for the disgraced Alan Weisselberg, who's in jail for being the chief financial officer. You got all these inside people. They got the outside people. David Pecker, right? Keith Davidson, the lawyer for a couple of these witnesses, a couple of the targets of the catch and kill program. The poor publisher from the from Random House, who had to read out loud all the passages that were so powerful, as you pointed out. Karen and I did a hot take on it with Donald Trump's own words, right? He's got his mind on his money and his money on his mind, right? Count the paper clips, pick up the pennies. This is how you become a billionaire. Donald Trump. That's the same guy that the checks that he signed to Michael Cohen, he didn't know what they were for. He didn't know about the gross up, meaning overpaying Michael Cohen so that when he had to pay income tax on it, it came out of Donald Trump's account, not out of Michael Cohen's account, because it really wasn't income to Michael Cohen. It was reimbursement for laying out the money for Donald Trump to Stormy. I mean, that's the kind of the evidence leading into Michael Cohen, but this kind of inside, outside, right? Interesting, scintillating witnesses you can't keep your eyes off of, like Pecker and Stormy and other ones that you could almost flatline in listening to them, but so critically important because this case is about checks, not sex, right? At the end of the day, leading into Michael Cohen. So I love the way they're doing it. Big pieces of puzzle, right? Of jigsaw puzzle being given to the jury as they stitch it together before their very eyes, before they get to their closing argument off of Michael Cohen and a few more witnesses. You want to critique how do you think the defense is doing so far? Because after the case in chief for the prosecution rests, they say people rest, right? Then the defense has to do something. Now, they've been cross-examining their way through the case. I get that. Do you think the defense calls witnesses, including the big guy, in the second half of when they get the case? And then, of course, at the end, there's a little bit of a rebuttal case by the prosecutors. What do you think the defense does? Who do you think they call as witnesses?
So to answer
how do you do it overall with this jury?
Yeah. So to answer that question first, how do I think they're doing? I think they're doing actually a decent job. The thing that they've done, that they've established, I think fairly well, there's no doubt that a crime occurred. The prosecution's done a brilliant job at that, right? These were false business records. And, it's in order to cover up another crime. I think the strongest other crime is actually to make a reimbursement look like wages to hide it. I think that's the strongest charge more than the election one, because that's just kind of confusing. I don't know. For whatever reason, in my brain goes to the tax one as the one that there's slam dunk, absolutely a crime has occurred. The thing that the defense has done a great job at is distancing Trump from that crime. And at the end of the day, all the witnesses who have testified, none of them have made Donald Trump have pointed out how there's no direct evidence that Donald Trump had any knowledge or intention to falsify the business records. And that's what the crime is, right? He meant to pay Stormy Daniels. He meant to reimburse Michael Cohen. He even meant to lie about what the money was when he paid Michael Cohen back. But so far, there's been no direct evidence that Donald Trump knew that they were going to record it differently in the books and records. That, I think, is unfortunately going to rely on Michael Cohen, who's going to have to provide that direct evidence. Now, there's tons of circumstantial evidence, which is important. But for example, Alan Weisselberg is not testifying. That's a huge hole, right? Donald Trump is probably not going to testify. I originally thought he was going to testify because I know he thinks he's his best spokesperson. He's going to want to say that he had nothing to do with this. But the reason I think ultimately he won't testify is different than what everyone else says. Everyone else says, every defense attorney would say, don't testify. He lies about everything. You can't control him. And there's reasonable doubt here. But the reason I don't think he's going to testify is slightly different. It's because he would have to admit that he'd never had these affairs and he never cheated on Melania. And I don't think he's going to ever go there. And I think it would be clear that he's lying to say that he's not, that he didn't do these things. And so if it's clear that he's lying, then it's game over. So in that regard, I don't think he's going to ultimately testify. But I worry a little bit that that there isn't that direct link, because they've corroborated everything else 10 ways to Sunday. I mean, really strong case. But like I said, that one little missing link, and Michael Cohen's going to fill that in, presumably. And but it depends on how Michael Cohen does on the stand. So I think the defense is actually doing a decent job. I think Emile Beauvais is been a really good cross-examiner. He's been effective, and we'll see what they do with Stormy. If I were them cross-examining her, I would, apparently she was giggling and, she hates him. I would try to get under her skin and get her, to kind of implode on the witness stand. We'll see if they're able to do that with her, or if it'll just kind of embolden her even more. We'll see. We'll see. I wish I was in the room for her. Look, Hope Hicks was a great witness. I mean, I was in the room for when she testified and broke down crying.
For the prosecution.
No, I was there for great witness for the prosecution. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thanks. I'm still a prosecutor deep down, but
right.
the defense is really but even with Hope Hicks, it's about the election. It wasn't about Melania. They still don't have that missing piece. And so that's what I've been waiting for. And the thing that, there is a little bit of doubt. They're not done proving their case. And I don't know if it's going to be reasonable doubt, but until Michael Cohen testifies, there's a little doubt there. So Michael Cohen is a lot more important than I think people realize, because he's the direct link.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we're going to follow it just the way we're doing it. Karen and Ben doing a great job. Sometimes I pitch in on the morning edition and on the wrap-up edition. Tuned to Midas Touch and Legal AF for that. Everything about Trump trial. We do it by days. And we're going to talk about, in the rest of the podcast, we're going to pick up with Judge Cannon, what she's doing down there with her case, and the trial calendar and the trial calendar that's now resulting from it as we await the Supreme Court's decision before they go away on their June holiday and issuing the immunity decision about private conduct versus official conduct, and what Judge Chutkan's going to do about that when she ever gets that case back, the DC election interference case. And I think we'll have a couple of minutes to touch on in Georgia, as expected. We've got a appeal to the intermediary appellate court in Georgia, not the highest court in Georgia, by Trump, because they were on the losing end of Judge McAfee's decision not to disqualify Fani Willis, as long as she fired Nathan Wade, which she did. While that case, we give a lot of grief and criticism, rightfully so, to Judge Aileen Cannon. I mean, Scott McAfee hasn't set his trial either. And there's no reason why he shouldn't, he's dispatched all the motions to dismiss, and he's handled all of that. He got rid of, he handled the big Fani Willis disqualification issue. But then again, she hasn't asked for it either. And I don't know if it's a peculiarity of Georgia criminal procedure, but you and I will talk about that as well. But first, another word from more of our sponsors. Did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? It can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses, and it's just gross. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning, antibacterial bedding such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters that prevent up to 99.7% of bacteria growth and require up to 3 times less laundry. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some five-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/legalaf to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo LegalAF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/legalaf and use the code LegalAF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/legalaf to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Sometimes I wish we could have things in life both ways, like a great glass of red wine, but without the headache. Well, that's not going to happen in that example, but it is possible to have it both ways with Mack Weldon. I know men tend to think looking sharp means starchy Oxfords and stiff chinos, rather than effortless comfort. But it's possible to have it both ways with Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon makes timeless apparel with modern performance fabrics for guys who want to look and feel sharp without sacrificing comfort. From their light as air underwear to innovative anti-odor tees and versatile yet comfortable pants, Mack Weldon has a full range of clothes that never go out of style. I love my Mack Weldon Ace sweatpants. They're incredibly comfortable and also very sharp looking. I have a real confidence boost knowing I'm wearing anything sold by Mack Weldon. Some guys just want to look good without calling attention to themselves. Mack Weldon apparel gives you understated good looks for understated confidence. Mack Weldon clothes are designed to fit your style and the demands of modern life. They look like regular clothes, but feel like the latest in modern comfort. They're the go-to choice for guys who want to look great without even trying. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code LegalAF. That's MackWeldon.com, promo code LegalAF. Lots of people ask us, how can we support the show besides watching it? Well, watching it is the first step. It's free subscribe to the Midas Touch Network. Help them get to 3 million free subscribers. A lot of our audience, especially in chat tonight, know that and have helped us in that way. Then we have audio version that will drop. Occasionally we forget to drop it, but we drop the audio version a few hours later. And if you kind of subscribe there and go back and forth between the two, it helps with the algorithm, as do comments. Chat's good too, but comments and thumbs up also helps us. We put together and curated a tremendous group of sponsors this year. Many of them are new. They weren't with our show last year. They do the midweek and sometimes they do the weekend and vice versa. So, and we like these sponsors and we vet them. We get the products. We use the products. You know, they're favorite brands of ours. And so supporting our sponsors who support us without imposing on our journalistic integrity or our analysis or telling us what to say is important. And so we thank our sponsors. We have After Darks, which is we take a show like this, we break it into 3 or 4 segments, and we launch it on YouTube again. We call them Legal AF After Dark. So we do that really for a promotional purpose. One, if you missed the show, it's a good way to catch up in little bite-sized pieces, like little bite-sized Snicker bars of each thing that we did. A couple things on Trump today, and then we get Cannon, and then whatever, they'll be there. But it's also like we are asking you to be our ad hoc marketing department. We don't have a marketing department. We don't have any hard assets. I made a joke during the hot take today. Like, this is my hard assets. Like, and I bought this. So that's it, man. We need help. And so one way to help grow the audience organically, naturally, word of mouth, is to kind of take that Legal AF After Dark, if you've seen it, right, and like send it off to friends and family people in your life and say, hey, I really like the show Legal AF. Remember I tell you about it? So maybe they don't want to make an hour and 20-minute investment, but they see the clip and then they join our audience. So that's another reason that we do it. And then to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the law, we set up a Patreon, patreon.com/legalaf. You can get civil versus criminal and reproductive rights and constitutional rights and procedural issues, all kind of like, I joke, it's like a TED Talk meets a law school class and has a baby, like that. So it's another way to support it for a couple of cups of coffee a month, and then we'll get you some exclusive videos there as well. But most of what I've just described is like free, just free, and that keeps our network alive, keeps us on the air, and keeps the content that you seem to enjoy coming to you without interruption. So that's why we do it. So now, after that pitch for the show, let me switch over to Judge Cannon. You said disgrace, and I say discuss. Go ahead, Karen.
I mean, she basically said, we're putting the trial over indefinitely forever, which is just beyond. Here, I'm going to pull up what her entry says. She essentially did a 5-page, the trial, the Mar-a-Lago documents case was set for trial for this month. But there's all these various hearings that she hasn't had and rulings that she hasn't done. And we all keep scratching our head saying, why does she still have this on the calendar for a trial this month when everybody knows that it can't possibly happen? And so as a result, it was just sort of this ridiculous date. She's not ruling on things that she should have and could have ruled on months ago. She's making these just rulings that are just outside the law that make no sense whatsoever, like she did in the beginning of this when she appointed a special master to go through the search warrant, and then she got reversed on that. And then the other real big misstep that she did about the jury, asking people to basically asking the sides to come up with hypothetical jury instructions based on a hypothetical that made no sense. And she was sort of like, it was just this very weird, these very weird decisions that she's done. And she just really seems to be out over her skis. She does not know what she's doing. There's no reason this trial should be in the posture that it's in. There's no reason this couldn't happen before the election. And so she finally today, May 8th, did an order setting a set of pretrial deadlines and hearings. And she said, following the court's order prior, to setting substantive pretrial deadlines, the court hereby establishes a second set of pretrial deadlines to manage pending discovery, disclosure, motions before the court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She then gives a chart of all these different a hearing on May 8th, a resolution of something on May 20th, a non-evidentiary hearing March 22nd or May 22nd. On and on and on. And then the SEPA Section 5 notice to all defendants for June 17th. And she basically gets to July 10th, 2024, the Special Counsel SEPA Section 6A Defense Reciprocal Discovery Deadline. And then she gets to, again, July 22nd, another SEPA Section 4 hearing with a status conference also on July 22nd, 2024. And basically said the court also determines that finalization of a trial date at this juncture before resolution of the myriad and interconnected pretrial and SEPA issues remaining and forthcoming would be imprudent and inconsistent with the court's duty to fully and fairly consider the various pending pretrial motions before the court, critical SEPA issues, and additional pretrial and trial preparations necessary to present this case to a jury. The court therefore vacates the current May 20th, 2024 trial date and associated calendar call to be reset separate order following resolution of matters before the court consistent with defendant's right of due process, the public's interest in a fair and efficient administration of justice. In reaching this decision, the court has fully evaluated the parties' positions and reviewed the procedural posture of this case in light of the pending motions. And then, she goes on and on and on about all the various things, the court's evaluated various statutory factors. So the time under the Speedy Trial Act is hereby told, meaning press pause, stop, up until the July 22nd, 2024 date to permit adequate time for hearings and adjudication of substantive pretrial motions, discovery, and SEPA. And then she essentially puts it over forever. I mean, she literally doesn't set a trial date because it's imprudent to set one at this time because there's all this stuff to be done. I mean, it's very strange. Other judges, in fact, most judges, Judge Mershon in this particular case, in the current trial, they set a trial date and you work backwards from there. And usually you can say, okay, it's going to take 6 months, or it's going to take 8 months, or it's going to take a year, or it's going to take, you can always move it and change it. But at a certain point, you should be able to set a trial date. Why 12 days before the date that was set for trial? I mean, like she did. She set May 20th for trial, but 12 days before she suddenly realized that, no, this can't happen. There's all these other things. I mean, she is slow walking everything. She won't even set a trial date. I mean, it's like the trial is going to be never. I mean, I actually don't understand what she's doing here. Either she's trying to help Donald Trump because he appointed her, or she's totally in over her head because she's a baby judge and doesn't know what she's doing. But this is just, I don't understand. It makes no sense. And yes, I shook my head because this Mar-a-Lago documents case is definitely not happening before the election. And frankly, if Donald Trump loses or wins the election, the case is going away forever. So Jack Smith has not done a motion to recuse her. He could have, I think, a couple of times. And I don't know that this is something that you could add to the list of reasons why she should be recused. But at some point, I do think they have to make that motion. She clearly cannot handle this case. I mean, it's just outrageous.
Yeah, and I used to think it was maybe baby judge, but then I did a hot take about her going regularly to undisclosed trips paid, ultimately by the founder of the Federalist Society, to George Mason University and Antonin Scalia Law School, along with all the other Federalists, to listen to seminars on woke law and basically attacking the Democratic agenda. It's one thing to be a Federalist. It's another thing, while you have active cases in front of you, including one involving Donald Trump, to go to undisclosed boondoggles at $10,000 or more, paid for by Leonard Leo, and the Koch brothers. I'm sorry. I just like my judges differently. I like them to be above the law, in the sense that, or above human greed, I guess is the better way to put it, and that the law is blind, and that's not the case. I mean, she should go out of her way not to have entanglements like that, but she doesn't, and so we are where we are as we expected. And I agree with you. I've been calling for Donald Trump. Sorry, I've been calling for Jack Smith to go after her legitimately to the 11th Circuit and ask for her to be reassigned and have a new judge reassigned to the case. And I don't know what they're waiting for. They might as well, as you said, they might as well. She's done everything she can to delay this case. It may not be her intent, but you have to eventually, when so many things like this go against the government, and ultimately she pulls the rug out from under it and says, as I joked, what idiot allowed all of these deadlines to pass without, resetting them, or things that should have been done 6 or 8 months ago or a year ago? What idiot did that? And, it's the judge. And then for her to say, well, we just can't get this case right. Yeah, well, no crap. You did it on purpose, is the part that we're trying to get to. We'll see what happens. I mean, I would do it. There's no downside, try for it. Go to the 11th. I think they're chomping at the bit at the 11th to take her on and maybe replace her. And this would be a great time because this case is at a stalemate. She's painted herself into a corner. She's doubled down on bad rulings to justify those bad rulings, everything that gives grounds to remove the judge. So, but Jack's got to do his job with his team, and I'm sure they're thinking about it. We're not giving him an idea they haven't thought of, and we'll follow it. So, I think that's it on Cannon. I think, if you don't mind, we'll move on and just touch briefly on the filing in Georgia at the Georgia Court of Appeals, the first stop at the appellate train. It's the intermediary appellate division. We expected it 2 months ago when Judge McAfee denied the motion to disqualify Fani Willis. He anticipated and actually invited. You guys want to take an appeal? You want to try an interlocutory appeal? I won't stand in your way. Go at an interlocutory appeal, meaning an appeal before the end of the case. At this, while we're in full steam here, full stream of the case, you have to get permission to do that. Usually it's trial judge certification. Not sure about in Georgia. And then Court of Appeals to ask them to, because you don't have as of right for an interlocutory appeal, you have to ask permission. But the judge made it clear, although it's a little bit loose language, what you and I'll talk about 2 months ago, when he said, sure, you want to go for the appeal? Great, but I'm not staying the case. And I'm going to continue to do the things that aren't related to this issue, like the motions in limit, the motions to dismiss, and keep this kind of train rolling, although there's no trial date set, back to another judge who seems to have an allergy to setting trial dates. But I think you and I went back and forth in some text messaging earlier. You have an opinion about what you think Trump's going to do next, and then tell our audience that. And then what do you think McAfee does with the case about setting it for trial? And lastly, my third question to you is, what is Fani waiting for in terms of asking for a trial setting?
This whole thing is just so perplexing to me. I just don't understand so if they rule that she is somehow disqualified from handling this case, is that going to mean every time there's an office romance in two prosecutors have a relationship that somehow that makes the person disqualified? I mean, there's no evidence that came out at the hearing that showed that there was any impermissible or financial entanglement that was disqualifying here. And so I just don't understand what the rule could be. Just, the appearance of impropriety. So any defendant can basically create this cloud of suspicion, not prove it at a hearing, and then because of what the defendant has raised, that means that the entire office is recused from the case. I don't know. I just don't understand this whole thing. I don't get Georgia, and I don't see it the way they see it. I watched every minute of those hearings, and the defense absolutely did not show any kind of disqualification that could have led to taking Fani Willis off the case. I was surprised, frankly, that the judge said, okay, you can stay on the case if Nathan Wade leaves. I just don't get it. Whatever. But to me, this whole thing just seemed very strange. And they didn't ask a lot of talking about impermissibly salacious details. I mean, the fact that we know that Nathan Wade has, issues in that situation because he has prostate issues, like, I don't want to know that. What does that have to do with being disqualified? But yet that's the kind of stuff that they talked about on the hearing. Not, why didn't they talk about, the financial arrangement? That's the only thing that could potentially be disqualifying, but they barely touched on it. It was all like an episode of Real Housewives, but somehow that's appropriate. But it's interesting because as we were watching the hearing, I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of Southern men in particular really were appalled. And it just seems strange to me because I'm like, I don't know, the whole thing. So I can't possibly even predict what they'll do in Georgia. But yes, it's
asked for a trial setting, Fani. Good news is she's steamrolling her way to re-election, because I think that community, rightly so, has rallied around her. And she's going to win re-election there in November 5th. She's down ballot from our president. And Scott McAfee, the judge, is on the ballot too. Talk about weird coincidences. Everybody runs here. There's law and politics at the intersection. But, we're trying to follow all these things. We got developments in the Jan 6th. Yes, there are still Jan 6 defendants that are being sentenced. We report on that. Reproductive rights, women's rights, civil rights, constitutional rights. We're not the all Trump channel all the time. Sometimes that's a criticism of ours that I don't think is appropriate. We're not going to bury the lead. We've got a former president on trial, as Karen laid out earlier, like a run-of-the-mill garden variety a criminal defendant in our shabbiest courthouse in New York. And now that we're in the third week, office workers in the neighborhood aren't even looking up from their lunch as to this trial. There's so few people down there. I was walking by today, I was walking by Trump Tower where Trump lives when he's on trial. There's nobody there because it's a city that never sleeps, and it's a city that doesn't give really a rat's ass about you, and puts everybody in their place. including Donald Trump, the incredible shrinking man, along with, no pun intended, based on some of the reporting about his body parts, incredible shrinking man, he was shrinking before our very eyes, into this little thing. It reminds me of the scene in Beetlejuice, when Beetlejuice is trying to get to the front of the line, and he's sitting next to the African head shrinker, and his little head gets shrunk. It's like, that's Trump and Blanche right next to him. I mean, I said on a hot take recently that he has these down days, these dark days when he tries to, raise money, connect with people, like running off and going to the fire department in New York and getting their name wrong in New York, calling them the NYFD instead of the FDNY is a problem. Going to a bodega to do another political stunt, and then where are the crowds? I mean, he's got all these controlled environment events, like he's selling NFTs that include a piece of his suit, like literally a suit off his back. He's selling it for money, along with sneakers and Bibles and all these other undignified ways of running for office that his supporters probably seem to be okay with. But where are the crowds? Where are the arenas filled with his supporters chanting his name? I mean, you always see it always looks like the same 7 or 8 wackos that are, with covered head to toe with red Trump paraphernalia, regalia. But where are the people? I get the polls. The pollsters make a living, right? There's the old joke about there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I throw polling into that last one. But where are the people? Joe Biden, our president, is out there making his closing argument to people and meeting people. And that, for me, is more valuable than what we're watching Donald Trump do in front of a bicycle rack every day at some appointed hour, some phony press conference, which is really just him unilaterally speaking and doing whatever he's doing. And I just, we've said, I have a lot of faith in our jury system. I have a lot of faith in our electorate to do the right thing at the end of the day. And we have to report on it. It's not that we get a special delight, although I do, to report on Donald Trump as much as we do. And when other things matter, Arizona Attorney General bringing their charges, Michigan, Nevada, anything related to abortion rights or women's rights or reproductive rights, we report on it too. And we use our various contributors to kind of fill in the gap, to kind of give you a good, healthy, well-balanced legal and political analysis that we think we do it a special way, only our way, here on the Legal AF podcast. And on Wednesdays, except when one of us is traveling or tied up with something else, it's Karen, Friedman, Agnifilo, and me. And on Saturdays, it's Ben Meisalas and me, unless we're covering. And soon we're going to be scrambling and covering a little bit. We'll tell you why, but we're going to be covering to cover a couple of these episodes. But it means a lot to us that you're with us as our audience. We care so deeply about each of you. Karen, you have a special bond with our audience, but what's your feelings about them?
Before I answer that question, you reminded me of something, which, so I hope you don't mind that I go back to it. But in this trial that we're following so closely, when you talked about polling, the lies and things that the shouldn't say lies, but the unreliability of polling. There's a piece of evidence that hasn't gotten a lot of play in this trial, which is it's Exhibit 35, and it is the bank statement that shows the $130,000 going into Essential Consulting, and then the $130,000 coming out to pay Stormy Daniels. It shows the date, but on it there's handwriting. And the handwriting is basically, how are we going to do this scheme? And it's Alan Weisselberg's handwriting. And it says, gross up the $130,000 and add this and blah, blah, blah. It's almost like the criminal scheme written on the document, the bank statement that is the hush money payment, right? This account that was opened just to pay Stormy Daniels. And it's written in Alan Weisselberg's handwriting. I mean, it's crystal clear that is the crime. Next to it is handwritten is a $50,000 payment to a polling company or like a PR company. And no one's really talking about this, but that was a PR company that they hired to get fake polling numbers. Okay. Talk about a fraud. And so it was almost like this document has all the places that we're going to commit, all the fake things and lies and where we're going to commit crimes. Let's just do it all here. And this is where they had that conversation. And I thought that was critical. You're going to see a lot of that in summation. And so I just wanted to mention it because when you talked about polling, and it just reminded me of that. And it's kind of a really important point. But to answer your question, our audience is, it's kind of the thing that keeps us going. There are times when I'll be completely honest, when I've had a hard day and I'm feeling down about something and I'm just having a rough time, and you know what I'll do? I'll go and I'll read the comments sometimes, like around one of our episodes, because people say really nice things. They talk about how much it means to them to have us, providing information, and they're really supportive. I thought people were going to be really disappointed or upset or critical of the fact that there were a couple times I had to report from the back of a taxi or a train. I felt very, like I was letting people down, that I was in a rush and that I couldn't sit, in an office with a microphone, and that I was, it's all jumpy and whatever. People could not have been nicer. And it actually, it gives you the strength, because you don't always have the time to do this or the energy to do it. Or as you were saying, we don't have, we don't have we have Salty, but, we have a few people who help us out, but we don't have this huge, production staff to do our research, et cetera. We do all these things ourselves, and so the audience is kind of the fuel that keeps us all going, and the support. I mean, look, we don't only get support, we get some colorful comments too. But I get a lot of constructive criticism too. I get people who give me advice and who say, hey, I just thought you should know X, Y, and Z. And I appreciate that too. I appreciate the people who actually take the time to either comment or reach out and give us feedback in, good and bad. And so, and sometimes, during these shows, I can't read the comments because our audience is also really, really clever, and they make me crack up. And and I'll sit here trying to keep a straight face and not crack up. So, yeah. So I just really want to thank everyone for the incredible support they give us.
We got to take time out to do that. I think that's one of the advantages to being on YouTube and not being on MSNBC or CNN and places where you and I could be and are. It's that we can actually talk to our audience, as a friend, like come into their living room, so to speak, as I used to say about, Walter Cronkite in the CBS days. We feel that way, and we feel a bond with our audience and those that follow us, and we're respectful of it because they're respectful of us. So we've reached the end of another episode of a midweek edition of Legal AF. Wednesdays, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, and me. Saturdays, Ben Meiselas and me. And then we've got these little special breakout Legal AFs like the morning and evening episodes with Karen and Ben about the Trump trial, which will continue right to the bitter end, which we think will be another 2 to 3 weeks. And then there'll be something else interesting and exciting that we'll bring to you. But until our next episode and the episode on Saturday with Ben and me and hot takes in between, this is Michael Popok and Karen Friedman Agnifilo signing off. Shout out to the Mighty and the Legal AFers.